a Mexican border city that was once called the most violent city in the world. It is Ciudad Juarez. We have an awful, awful story from rehab. Before I jump in there, I'll go and give you a bit of a rundown of what's happening there. Give me one sec to pull this off, and we'll be ready to go. One sec. Hey, Austin Brennan, thanks for dropping by, man, and thanks for your kind message. So, let me tell you what happened with this story. This woman, she is based out of Kansas City. She's a Mexican descent woman living in Kansas for the last 10 years. And she got a bad run with drugs and alcohol. After several years of struggling with drug addiction, she calls her family down in Ciudad Juarez and asks them to help her find a good rehab center in the city. She was brought into Juarez, and that same night she was put in a rehab center called Monarch in downtown Ciudad Juarez. This was a center made for a rehab center meant for women only. So there were only women, and the owners are two girls. But what she found there was a fucking horrifying story. Let me read out these nice laid out article by Julian Resendiz. All right, in Border Report, a Mexican judge has ordered the head of a Juarez drug rehab clinic and her friend to stand trial for femicide in connection with the death and dismemberment of a former Wichita, Kansas resident. Chihuahua State Judge Brisa Yadira Meraz on Friday told defense attorneys and prosecutors there is enough evidence to presume that Diana Paola E.L. and Claudia Rubi R.E. betrayed the trust of a patient, killed her during an episode of drug withdrawal, and then dismember her body in an attempt to hide the evidence. The woman now faced 41 to 80 years in prison for the aggravated femicide of Celia Janet Castañeda, a 35-year-old woman. An autopsy revealed the woman died of blunt force trauma to the head. Basically, she was beaten up to death. The judge ruled a gender bias applies because the woman took advantage of a person under their care, someone who was vulnerable because of her illness, and that they likely would not have done the same to a man. Also, there was a high level of cruelty and hate against a female, and they defaced her body after the killing, Meraz said during the Friday's hearing. State police, acting on a tip of the evening of May 19, arrested the two women at a home neighborhood just south downtown of Juarez. The judge on Friday read a police report describing how the owner of the property opened the door to police officers, pointed them to his tenant's front door, and a woman later identified as Claudia Rubi, the clinic's operator, opened the door. The report says the officer saw a metallic trash can with bloody black and white pajamas and a woman's slipper. As the officers entered the residence, Diana Paola and Claudia Rubi allegedly tried to run away from the property, but were caught and subdued by the officers. When backup arrived, the scene was straight out of a Hollywood slasher movie. Police found plastic buckets inside a bathtub filled with human bones and flesh, plastic bags containing 6 large bones and 2 patellas, which is basically the kneecaps, and a blender filled with human flesh. A female pelvis had been stripped from the genitalia, which the suspects allegedly tried to liquefy along with other soft body tissues and intestines. For the sake of not re-victimizing the victim, for the sake of her dignity, I will not go on reading the police report, Meraz told prosecutors and defense attorneys as the 2 suspects sat in the back. The 2 women wore gray sweatsuits and black tennis shoes, standard issue at Juarez Cerezo Número 2 Women's Prison. Neither addressed the court on Friday. Defense attorney Luis Oaxaca said his clients may have been found by police in the same house as the human remains. But that doesn't mean they killed Castañeda. He said forensic experts have concluded Castañeda was not killed at the home where the remains were found. Come on. Oaxaca said Juarez police only have a hypothesis of what they think happened, but have nothing but circumstantial evidence. He said police did not have a search warrant to enter the home where the remains were found. He asked the judge for the woman's release. State prosecutor David Armendariz said investigators have plenty of evidence, including a business card of Monarch Drug Rehab Clinic found next to the remains. They also have testimony from the aunts of the victim who took her to Monarch on May 16 and were told by suspects on May 18 that her niece had escaped the clinic. Her relatives took Castañeda to the clinic after she returned from the United States and developed an addiction to drugs and alcohol. A neighbor who used to be a cook at Monarch recommended the clinic to them. Investigators' testimony read at Friday's hearing includes that of Castañeda's aunt, stating she was told her niece had a violent episode and assaulted a caretaker the night she disappeared. She also testified she saw another female patient when she dropped her relative. After her disappearance, the clinic was empty. Armendariz said the officers who entered their home did not need a search warrant after seeing the bloody clothes. At the time, they were in a crime scene and the woman were in flagrant commission of a crime. He said police did have a search warrant when they raided the Monarch clinic hours later, which is where Castañeda was likely killed. Armendariz asked for 5 months from the judge to perform DNA testing and find other patients at the rehab clinic that could serve as witnesses. The judge granted a stay and ordered the woman to remain in prison until then. She said there is probable cause that the women are guilty as charged. In Mexico, trials are presided by judges, not juries. Diana Paola and Claudia Rubí were handcuffed by a prison guard immediately after the hearing and taken back to Cerezo número 2. This is literally a fucking horror movie. Not the first time, guys. Rehab centers in Mexico, it's so easy and they're so permissive. It's so easy to just own a rehab center in Mexico that everybody does. Everybody does. I mean, if you talk to, it's even a cartel business model. They usually have, at least in Ciudad Juarez and Culiacan and Tijuana, that I know it's happening probably in several other different cities in Mexico, but these cartel business model, what they do is they set up rehab centers, first of all, to launder money. Second of all, to hide sicarios, the hitman. When they go and do a hit, after that, they go back in hiding into a rehab center where the police probably don't suspect someone is going to be hiding. And third, because most of the people they have selling drugs out in the streets, they literally they get caught in addiction and the cartel puts them on rehab so they don't consume their own product. Also, I've seen some other videos from this rehab center from years before. And you can see these two owners, these two women, forcing interns to fight amongst them. Two girls fighting, like bare fists, hitting each other with all of their fucking heart for over like 2 or 3 minutes. This was happening at this rehab center. So this is another issue on top of a wider issue, right? We have the addictions problem. These women probably didn't want to be at a US-based rehab center because also if you don't have medicals, it's super expensive to go into fucking rehab. So she came back to Juarez with her family. A family member recommended Monarch Center, el Centro de Rehabilitación para Mujeres Monarca, where she broke out an episode, got brutally killed by beating her, and then these two women try to make her disappear by chopping her to pieces and trying to dissolve her bones on acid. This is fucking sick. This is what cities like Ciudad Juarez are facing. This is a consequence of the violence, the general violence of a country like Mexico and a city like Ciudad Juarez. Awful, awful stuff, guys.